So the reader, it's a different type of book. So it's partly a biography of Pope Benedict XVI, but it's then after it's a biography. So part one, it's called The Life, and it's just that could be the biography portion. So the first 40 pages are just a biography of Pope Benedict, but then the rest is a conglomeration of all of his writings and his teachings from different parts. Some when he was the Holy Father, and some are from encyclicals. Others are from when he was in the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith. And so it just has a whole series of different parts to it. And the Word on Fire is the one that Father Barron's group, or Bishop Barron's group, is the one that put this out. They put it out, and it came out in early July, I want to say. And then, gosh, it was about a month later, all of a sudden, then Bishop Barron puts out his Catechesis on the Creed. And he's got a video series with a workbook and a teacher's guide and videos that you can watch. And it's perfectly attuned to teaching the RCIA coursework, because it goes over the elements of the creed. And remember, that's the whole purpose of RCIA, is mostly for adults that are coming into the faith, that at the Easter Vigil, they would recite the creed for the first time and agree that, they would agree that, not that they understand all the aspects of the creed, or the 12 articles in the creed, but that they believe those things to be truth as proclaimed by the Catholic Church, and then to receive the sacraments, so baptism and the First Holy Communion then. So about a month later, then all of a sudden, Bishop Barron puts out, this video series and everything that he's had before. His church series, we didn't do it as a video, we just did it as the book. Maybe about 4 years ago, our RCA program, remember, was the Bishop Barron book called The Church, and it just broke things down. But, these, I could tell as soon as I looked at the reader that it was going to be a book that's perfectly suited for teaching RCA, because if you go to the table of contents there right at the beginning, you'll see it's got, like I said, that part one is the life of Pope Benedict. Then part two is on God, so there's 3 chapters on the persons of God. And then part 3 is on the second person of the Trinity, on Jesus Christ. And so it talks about the birth of Christ, Jesus on the cross, the resurrection, eschatology. And then it goes to the church. So part 4 is on the Catholic Church. And then there's part 5 is on Vatican II. Then there's a part on Scriptures. And then the sacraments of the Church. And then there's a section on Mary. So it's just exactly like that book that we did from Bishop Barron a couple years back in the Catholicism book. It has all the same type of chapter headings. And then goes into the Church Fathers, which we did last year, remember? We had the Church Fathers that we went through. And the saints, we could say. And then there's a section on prayer. And then there's a catch-all section with faith in the modern world to close out the book. So it's a different type of book in that it's a conglomeration of all these different writings and teachings that Pope Benedict had before. So, remember I told you that joke? Back before Pope Benedict was even the Holy Father, remember he's in charge of the Doctrine of Faith, the Congregation of Faith, and it's his job. He's like, they called him like the Rottweiler of the church. Like, he made sure that everybody stayed in line, that you weren't practicing any heresies, and he would get after priests that were, getting towards what they thought was the cutting edge, but they were getting on the boundary of committing heresies and things. Pope Benedict was always, Joseph Ratzinger was always the bishop that brought him back into the church and made him teach just Catholicism 101 or whatever. But there's that joke that, Paul VI dies and goes to heaven, and they show him coming up the escalator, up the elevator, and St. Peter's at the top of the elevator, and God the Father's on the side there, and God the Father says, "Oh, Paul VI, I'm glad you're finally here. Let me show you around heaven." And Peter's like, "God, you told me that I'm supposed to be at the keys to the kingdom. We have to ask Pope Paul VI a few questions, and if he answers them right, then he can come in, right? And so God says, oh, don't worry, Pope Paul VI, you'll be fine. Just go into that room over there with St. Peter and you'll be fine. He'll ask you a few questions. I'm sure you'll get them right. You're the Holy Father. And so he goes in the room and you can hear St. Peter's voice, and then you can hear Pope Paul VI's voice, and then you hear Peter's voice a little louder, and then Paul VI's voice a little louder, and then all of a sudden all you hear is St. Peter yelling. And all of a sudden the door opens and Paul VI comes out, and he's got sagged shoulders, and he gets on the escalator and he's going down. And God says, what happened, Paul VI? He goes, I got something wrong in my encyclical Humanae Vitae, and Peter's making me do some time in purgatory. Oh, you'll be back before you know it, don't worry. And then Pope John Paul II, he comes up the escalator. Oh, God says, John Paul, we waited so long for you to come here. Now you're here. What great joy there is in heaven. Come share your master's joy. And Peter's like, nope, God, you told me I got these keys. I'm supposed to interview these people before they can come in. He said, oh, don't worry, John Paul. You'll be fine. Just go in that room over there with St. Peter and he'll ask you some questions. And so same thing. They go in there. You hear Peter. Then there's Pope John Paul's voice. Then Peter a little louder. John Paul a little louder. Then all you hear is St. Peter yelling. And so finally the door opens and John Paul comes out and he slumps shoulders. He goes down the escalator. What happened? I wrote so many encyclicals. I got a lot of things wrong. In my 5 years at Pope Peter's making me do some time in purgatory. So he goes down to purgatory. Don't worry, we'll see you soon. And then Joseph Ratzinger, who's become Pope Benedict XVI, but he's still just in charge of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith. Joseph Ratzinger dies, and he comes up the escalator. And again, God's welcoming him, and Peter just jingles the keys. He's like, God. He's like, oh, don't worry, Joe, you'll be fine. Just go in that room and answer some questions, and I'm sure you'll come out okay. And so you hear Peter, and then you hear Ratzinger. And then you hear Peter again, and you hear Ratzinger a little louder, and all of a sudden, all you hear is Joseph Ratzinger's voice yelling. And the door opens, and St. Peter comes out. He's got some shoulders, and he's going down the escalator. And God says, Peter, what happened? He goes, I got something wrong in my second letter. Joseph Ratzinger pointed it out to me. I gotta go do time in purgatory. So that's the image that the church has of Pope Benedict. Is like, he's a stickler for the faith. And so, if we could read and understand the reader, we'll be light years ahead of when we first came. This is going to be a challenging read, but like you'll find in the chapter that we discussed today, there's just this gem in there, and it's like you're getting beat over the head with all these long words and this technical discussion. And I don't mean to say that, but it's on technology. But Ratzinger is analyzing such things to such minutia, and then all of a sudden you're feeling like, am I understanding what he's even saying here after a while? And then all of a sudden he just says one simple thing. It's like, holy cow, that was worth it. It's like, that's the intellect of Pope Benedict is, in a couple hundred years, definitely he'll be one of the church fathers, or one of the doctors of the church is what they'll call him. So just has such a grasp of Catholic theology, and just if we can understand maybe just a small portion of what he's written for us, I think we'll grow in that love for Jesus Christ, and our souls will really be caught on fire. So, in typical Father Randy fashion, I just like to jump around in the book, and so that's, maybe we won't jump around as much going from section to section. Maybe we'll take a section at a time, but just I wanted to start in that last section, part 11. I went to the last chapter, so I read chapter 54 first, and that's where it's an interesting thing. It's about the development of peoples and technology, and so it was an interesting subject I thought to begin with. But it starts back on page 348, and it's just got this gem at the very end of things that is really kind of like it could be a life-changing thing. But this this chapter, it's really an excerpt from a 2009 encyclical, and where the Pope was talking about the promises and the dangers that technology can offer to the development of the human person. And so Pope Benedict's got this image, and I think the church does as a whole, that mankind is progressing, that we're supposed to be, I think you've heard me say this before, we're supposed to be more in love with God today than we were yesterday. We're supposed to be more holy today than we were yesterday, especially if we receive the sacrament. So, daily Mass goers, you know, I almost feel sorry for you, but I don't, because I'm in the same boat as you. But we that receive the sacrament every day or multiple times a day, the judgment's going to be harder on us. It's going to be like Paul VI and John Paul II, when Peter really gave them the riot act, that they were given so much, and God expected, holy cow, you wouldn't believe how much God expected from them back because He gave them so much. But isn't that a characteristic of love? Your lover, they love you, and they expect an amount of love back, especially if the person's given up their whole life for you, which Jesus did on the cross. He gave up His whole life for us. And so He expects us to respond to that great love in a fashion that we're capable of giving that love back to Him. And so that's this chapter about, you know, the church has this image that mankind is developing a stronger and stronger relationship with God. And we in the year 2021 are going to be held to a higher standard than people of 10 years ago, or 2 generations ago, or definitely hundreds of years ago, because we've been given so much more by the church herself. You know, it would be crazy for people even 100 years ago, or 200 years ago definitely, to have a book like this in their hand, where it's a conglomeration of knowledge about the Catholic faith on so many different subjects and at such a deep level. This would be unheard of just a few generations in the past. And yet we can have it for $19.95. You know, all we have to do is pay that amount, and the book is given to us. And if we open it and care to spend the time that it takes to have this knowledge imparted to us, you know, great things can happen. And so this idea of the development of peoples and technology, you know, the Pope talks about how the human person is actively involved in his own development. And there's a beautiful definition on the first paragraph there on page 348, where the Pope defines who a person is. That he says that we're all a gift to each other. So God made each one of us, and it's not by chance that you're in this room with the people that you're in this room with. That God wanted to give you as a gift, not only to the person sitting next to you, but the person at the front of the classroom or the back of the classroom as well. That we're a gift to each other. And it's somehow by the relationship that we have with each other, that each one of us is going to grow to the level of holiness that we need to attain in order to become a saint. That if we didn't have these people living in the town of Sublette, or we didn't have the people coming from Chicago that go to Woodhaven that come and interact with us just on Sunday, if we didn't have them in our life, somehow we would miss out on the full growth and capacity of holiness that God wants us to attain. See that? So that's why I always say, you know, people, you know, it's like Bishop Dorn's thing about priests and being assigned to a parish. He says, you know, I'm going to assign you to a parish for 6 years. You'll be made a pastor. You'll go there for 6 years. And then after the 6 years, I'll ask you once if you want to stay. And if you do, then I'll renew your term for 6 more years. But I always have, Bishop Dorn would say, I always have that ability not to re-up you for another 6. If I want you to move somewhere else, I'll ask you if you want to stay. But if you say yes, and I want you someplace else, you'll have to go there eventually anyway. But he would say, some of the priests would ask him, you know, why can we only stay 6 years at a parish? And Bishop Dorn will say, because, you know, there's going to be people at the parish, they love you. There's 10% of the people, they love you, and they think that you can walk on water, that you can do anything. They really are enamored with your priesthood. And then there's 10% of the people that they hate your guts, and they want to drown you in that water that the other people think you can walk on. And they can't wait for you to leave. And so if I only have you there 6 years, they only have to put up with you for 6 years. And then he said, and we said, what about that other 80% of the people? And the other 80%, he said, the other 80%, they don't care who their priest is. You know, they just want the Eucharist, right? And so, you know, that's the image that it stays with you, and that, you know, 10% of the people love you, 10% hate you, 80% of the people don't really care about you. But, you know, the bishop assigns you someplace, and it's for the good of the people, and it's for the good of the priest. You're supposed to be making me grow in holiness. I'm supposed to be making you grow in holiness. But there becomes a point in that relationship where the growth in holiness, it's either waxing or it's waning. That's why the Bishop Dorn always had that, where he would only keep you so long at a place, right? And then you would get somebody else in that maybe fit that other 10% that hated you. It would be to their benefit, right? So, but this human person, you know, that we're a gift to each other, and our freedom to make choices. We often think that we make this choice because of this, because we decided to. But oftentimes, and Pope Benedict is saying in this first chapter where he's describing I and the self, you'd be surprised at how much yourself is shaped by the people around you. And he's saying that yourself and the freedoms that you have and the choices that you make are also shaped by the culture or the technology around you. Okay, so that becomes the gist of of chapter 54 here is, you know, how is the human person developing, growing closer to God in his loving relationship, falling in love with God? How is that progress being added to or subtracted from by the technology of the day that we find ourselves immersed in the culture? Okay? And so he has this line, it's like, you almost have to read it like 3 or 4 times to get it. It's like, it's on page 348 there. It says, it's right at the bottom. It says, we must fortify our love for a freedom that is not merely arbitrary, but is rendered truly human by acknowledgement of the good that underlies it. And I think what I came up with was, I'm always trying to get people to ask for the sacraments. I want you to wake up on Sunday morning and say, it's Sunday, it's the day that I'm going to dedicate to God. I'm not going to do work. I'm just going to be there and put myself in the presence of God and let Him love me, and I'm going to show my love for Him. But it's Sunday, so I'm going to go to church and I'm going to receive the Eucharist. I want you to wake up and ask for the sacrament. Or if you go on Saturday night, I want you to ask for the sacrament on Saturday night. If you're the one that's continually asking for the sacrament, and the priest gives it to you, that's better in God's eyes than, say, like the grade schooler that's already had their first communion is several years in the past, but the reason that they're coming to Mass is because Mom and Dad are bringing them to church, and they're expected to go every Sunday, and they get in line with everybody else, and they receive the Eucharist. So why did they come to Mass and why did they receive the Eucharist? Not by a choice of their own, but by the choice that their parents instilled upon them. I want people to ask for the sacraments, and it doesn't so much happen, not so much with the Eucharist as it does with the sacrament of reconciliation. You know, this is the sacrament that everybody hates, but what is the sacrament of reconciliation? It's me condemning myself for my sins. You know, we're all sinners, but when I go to confession, I admit that I'm a sinner, and what's the word I'm looking for? I think condemned is too strong a word, but in the book of Revelation it talks about how at the judgment, the evil one is going to convict us. That's the word I want. The evil one is going to be there at our judgment, Satan, and he's going to say to God, all of the sins that we ever committed in our life. Satan wrote them all down. He memorized them. He knows each and every sin that we've committed our whole life. And he's going to present that list to God and say, how could you allow this person into heaven? Look at all the sins that they had. And Jesus Christ is going to look at the list and say, I don't remember him doing any of those things. Because when they came to reconciliation, if they convicted themselves of those sins, I gave them absolution. And once I absolved them of their sin, I never remembered what the sin was. Because we convict ourselves. We ask to be absolved of our sins. And God did it. That's the reason that we'll enter into the glory of heaven. That's the reason that we grow in the development of our relationship with Jesus Christ, is because we ask to receive the gifts that Jesus Christ wanted to give us in the first place. See that? Jesus wants to give us all the sacraments, but we have to ask for them. And that's what a person does when they come to RCIA, is they say, you know, I never received baptism, I never received confirmation, I never received the Eucharist. I want Jesus to give me those sacraments. Right? And I'll do whatever the church asks of me to put myself in the capable position to receive that sacrament. Right? And so what's RCIA? It's the development of people. The development of holiness of peoples. Okay? So that's what I think of when I read that little line of Pope Benedict, is how a priest always wants a person to ask for the sacraments. I think it's the greatest thing. It almost makes me cry if somebody's at the hospital and they're sick and they're not going to make it. And what do when the priest walks in the room? They say, Father, will you hear my confession? And I came down there to anoint them. And yeah, anointing is to be preempted by reconciliation if the person is capable. But it's seldom that the person will say, you know, I want to go to reconciliation before I'm anointed. And put that cart after the horse. Right? But when that happens, it's like, holy cow, this person gets it. They're trying to convict themselves before the evil one does it in front of God. See that? So you always want to be that person. You ask to receive all the sacraments. Not that you wake up on Sunday, oh, I'm Catholic, I got to go receive the Eucharist. It's, I'm Catholic, I get to receive the Eucharist. I want Jesus to give me that gift. If he died on the cross, he must really want to give it to me. I want to receive it. So, technology, Pope Benedict has just a generic definition of it, is our response to God's command to till and to keep the land. So in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, when God tells Adam to till the soil, that you'll be a keeper, you'll be a farmer, you know, that's technology to Pope Benedict. We often ask, too often we ask how and not enough why. So it's that old image of, you know, why did they climb Mount Everest? Because it's there. You know, we don't do something just because we're capable of doing it. And so the Pope is saying we have to ask questions about, you know, how we use technology and why we use technology. Not that technology will allow us to do this, so let's do it. We have to say, why do we want to use that technology? is it going to be for the betterment of ourselves or our fellow man? Are we all going to develop better? So, yeah, some of these technological marvels like a washing machine, yeah, they save us so much time because now you can just throw the clothes in the thing, turn some dials, the water comes out, you put a little soap in there. I don't know how to do it. But, you know, the technology allows you to walk away and to go read sacred scripture or go spend time with your family members, whatever. So technology, you know, gives us this a great leisure of time, more time to do things. But we have to ask more often, you know, why do we want to use this technology, or what good can come out of this technology? Not just, you know, we have the capability to do this, so let's just do it. He has this one quote, it says, human freedom is authentic only when it responds to the fascination of technology with decisions that are morally responsible. So that's a quote on page 350. So remember, he's always talking, what it means to be human is to be making conscious decisions. You know, you're a human being, you have this ability to analyze a situation and to make a choice. A dog, a cat, an animal, they can analyze a situation, but the options open to them, their freedom to choose, are pretty much determined already. And so, like I said, there's a group of cells in a dog's stomach. Remember I had that homily a couple weeks ago. If a dog didn't have that group of cells in its stomach, it would see water, and it would just drink up all the water that's there. It wouldn't stop drinking until all the water was gone. But because these cells are there and they become saturated with nerve impulses, the dog knows when to stop drinking when he's had enough. If that group of cells wasn't there, the dog would hurt himself drinking so much water, you know? But human beings, the decisions we make, they influence the person of our, Pope Benedict will talk about this word called being, B-E-I-N-G. Being is the gift that God has given us. So God is this being that has always been and always existed. Even before time began, God had his being. Remember, he says to Moses, I am who am. You know, I am being. I do exist. You know, the human being exists because God created him. But all the actions of man influence then who he is as a person. And so you can look at your life and you can say, how did I get to this point in my life? I made these decisions to get here. You know, how did I get married? Well, I made that decision a long time ago. When I courted this woman, when I courted this man, to get married to them. I made that decision, that's why I'm married now. And so our decisions influence who we are as a person, huh? And he's talking about, most of the chapter is built around how we need to have a morally, we have to form our consciences morally to make the right decisions when it comes to technology. If all of a sudden we let technology run things and we say that there is no God, then the Pope, in the philosopher that he is, comes out. He says, when you say that there's no God, then two questions come up. How could your being emerge from nothing? And how could your intelligence be born from chance? And so those are the two things that happen, that if you say there is no God, that how do you account for yourself emerging from the primordial ooze or whatever? How do you account for your being? And how do you account for your intelligence? Those are things that God gave us. God made you a human being, not a dog and not a rock. And that's why you are who you are. And that's why there's so much question. Part of the latter pages of the chapter are on the moral issue of abortion. You know, now we have the technology to decide only after these organ systems, like a heart that's beating, only after a respiratory system is fully capable of bringing in oxygen and expelling out the carbon dioxide, only after these systems are in place is that group of cells, have they become a person. You know, technology will try to say, when is when is the human being a human being? And Pope Benedict is trying to tell us that, no, these issues of being and intelligence, they aren't, we can't put a clock to them or put a measuring device to them. They happen at the instant of conception. That part where God infuses a soul into a group of cells, that's when the baby becomes a human being. Okay? So God reveals the man to himself. God tells us who we are. And the shocking thing is that God tells us, I made you in the image and likeness of my Son. That's how great I made your being. That the second person of the Trinity, who has always been God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, right? You are made in his image and likeness. And he wasn't made at all. He's always been. That's that beauty there. On page 354, he says, right down at the end, it's one big paragraph to start it, and right at the end of that paragraph you'll see the last sentence or two. It says, God reveals man to himself. And just before that, when the poor of the world continue knocking on the doors of the rich, the world of affluence runs the risk of no longer hearing those knocks on account of a conscience that can no longer distinguish what is human. So remember that biblical story of Lazarus sitting at the rich man's gate, and the rich man stepped over him every day. You know, the rich man lost the ability to see Lazarus as another human being that he should have had concern for and care for, and at least gave him the scraps from his table. And so even though Lazarus was begging at the door, knocking, pretty soon the knocks became unhearable to the man, to the rich man. And that's what happens with, can happen with technology. Technology can take away our ability to see the humanness of another person. And so Pope talks about in this chapter a little bit about how those people that are in the military, now you can, by a satellite, you can drop bombs on another country from a computer screen half a world away. And yet those decisions that that person made that was in the military, they're human actions, and they had consequences on other human beings. And we have to see the morality of that. It can be that the technology removes that human element so far from us that we can start pushing buttons and not realize or contemplate that other people that are just like us are dying half a world away. That's the poison of technology. And I just thought, he says that what technology will try to do is reduce the soul of the person, which is one of the most important aspects of the human person, the soul. It can reduce the soul to just emotional health. And I always remember here Yuri Zalechnikov at my last job at Cyril, before I went into the seminary. He was a Russian scientist and real smart guy and everything, head of a department. And he's like, Randy, why you want to become priest? Why don't you just stay here at Cyril and you could be spiritual advisor to us, huh? You know, a scientist, a chemist has a bad reaction. He doesn't get the product he wants. He's depressed. He could come into your lab and speak with you for a few minutes, and you could make him go away feeling better about himself and that you'll have a successful reaction tomorrow. You know, it's that your soul is just, somehow it's only built into your emotional health, and not that there's, you know, that there's, your soul is that part of you that most is like God, and that God wishes to touch with these things that are called sacraments of his Son that Jesus died on Calvary to give us. You know, there's no concept of that with this emotional health of the soul. And that's what a lot of scientists will think, that, you know, if the soul is just what makes you feel that you've accomplished something for the good of mankind. You know, it's reduced just to an emotional feeling. Okay? And then I talked about the gem that was in the chapter. It doesn't even really say it point blank, but on page 356, the last page of the book then, he says, Pope Benedict says that our Catholic faith gives us the ability to glimpse the beyond. To glimpse the beyond. That's how you spell Caravaggio. So Howard had the right thing. It's Cara. So this is just city. I think this is just city. And so it's really the city of Cara. Cara is, it has a lot of meanings. It could be love. It could be expensive. Expensive. That's one of the reasons. So it's like the expensive city or the lovely city, something like that. Caravaggio is just, Michelangelo was his first name. He was Michelangelo of the town of Caravaggio. So that's a town in Italy. So remember, even though this is like 1600s, everybody would have known who Michelangelo was from the town of Caravaggio. That's that guy that painted that painting. You know, there's so few Michaels in the town, they know exactly who it is. They would just call him, his last name's not really Caravaggio, that's just the city that he's from. So, okay, where are we going? To glimpse the beyond. That's, I think that'll kind of be our modus operandi for RCA this year, or what we could put on things is we're trying to glimpse the beyond. We're trying to get a better glimpse of God. We're trying to get a better glimpse of what heaven is like. We're trying to get a better glimpse of where our Catholic faith is wanting to take us. That's the purpose of RCIA, is to glimpse the beyond. You could say to glimpse heaven. That's what we're trying to get a picture of, a better picture of. Because if we see how beautiful heaven is, and who's waiting for us there, God Himself, then we'll make the right decisions along the path as things happen in our life. We'll make the right decisions to make sure that we arrive at the destination that we want. Right? And it's always going to be that Jesus Christ is going to help us to make those decisions, and to make those decisions joyfully, I would say, also, by giving us the sacraments. Those are the powers that Jesus Christ is going to give us that are going to help us to propel us along the path that leads to heaven. So that's kind of what our RCA is all going to be about this year. Is we're going to try to glimpse what heaven is like a little clearer each week by going through a different element of our Catholic faith through the Reader book that Pope Benedict came up with. Okay? So I just wanted to introduce it there. I think next, we won't meet next week. Because why? Oh, I'm up in Rockford for a priest meeting on Tuesday, but the first Tuesday in October, that'll be the 5th, October 5th, we'll jump to part 3. So see part 3 there? We'll start to hit on those chapters of who is the person of Jesus Christ. That's a humongous part of our Catholic faith. But we'll start there for our first section then that we go through. So part 3, just read a couple of the chapters in there. Maybe jump around like I do in the reading of them, but you'll see that like the chapter 11, the birth of Jesus, that all comes from his one book that came out a few years ago when he first became Pope, of the early years of the life of Christ. So Jesus of Nazareth series was all about his birth. Okay. So October 5th at 6:30, and we'll do part 3 from the Reader. That's the part on Jesus Christ. Okay.
Can I go back, and you said there was one, I didn't get where was that proof of the existence of God that you had in that chapter?
Oh, yeah.
Page was that?
The questions come up on page 353. He says if technology...
Where is that on the page? Where is it?
Yeah, it's in the first paragraph. And those two questions come out about midway through. It says, it's no coincidence that closing the door to transcendence brings a person up short against a difficulty. How could being, that should actually be in quotes, B-E-I-N-G, how could being emerge from nothing? And how could intelligence be born from chance? So he's saying if technology rules out that there is a God, then those two questions come up. And how does technology answer those questions? How did your being, your humanness, emerge out of the nothing of the cosmological soup or whatever? And how do you have the intelligence that you do? The intelligence you were born with, how did that arrive? You know, if a God didn't exist, how did we get those things? You know, those are products of the soul. And who created the soul? It's God, right? So technology will always point to the physical creation of matter, saying this formed because of this, that, and the other thing. But this mysterious thing called the soul, which is where your intellect is, because we can look at a dog's brain, and some St. Bernards, their brain is actually bigger than mine. But do they have the ability to read a book or to contemplate the beauty of a picture or something? You know, a dog just sits there and pants. He doesn't even, he sees black and white, so all he sees is the same colors I would see in this painting. But he just sees it as, you know, 7 people in a picture. But he doesn't know what that is. He'll bark at it the first time he sees it, and then as soon as he realizes it's not people that are moving, he doesn't know what it is. It's just that black and white image of those guys that give me food every night. So where does that intellect come from? It comes from your soul. Even though these other animals have a brain exactly like yours with the same chemical neuroresponders and everything in it that I have, they can't formulate questions, and they can't appreciate music, and they can't know of the existence of God. That's why you have your pet blessed on St. Francis' feast day, because they're not smart enough to ask for a blessing because they don't know that God exists. So you have to be smart enough for them on their sake and ask for a blessing on them. Right? That's the point of St. Francis. Okay. Okay, let me check this.